Okay, good morning, everybody, or good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. Welcome to this Biggerplate webinar. My name is Liam. I'm going to be your host, your presenter, your guide through the topic today, if you like. And our topic today is MindMeister for startups. So thank you all very much for taking the time out of your days to join me. I know we're all spending a lot of time on virtual meetings and webinars, etc. So I certainly appreciate you taking the time out of your day, wherever you are in the world, to come join us today. I can see a really great international audience on the call. So welcome to you all wherever you are on the planet. I'm going to be handling both the questions and the chat today. So a couple of kind of quick housekeeping notes from me. It would help me if you could put questions, specifically things you might want me to give you an opinion or an answer to. If you could put questions in the Q&A box in Zoom, that helps me to just keep track of those a little bit more easily. Feel free to also add things into the chat, but because the chat tends to move quite quickly, it can be slightly tricky for me to keep up with. Also on the line today, I'm not going to get him to introduce himself because he probably prefer to just stay in the background. David from the MindMeister team has kindly agreed to come and act as a sort of backup questions helper if needs be. If anybody has any sort of product questions that I can't answer, I'm going to direct over to David, who obviously might be able to answer those a little bit more specifically. So without any reason for any great delay, I'm going to jump straight into our presentation today, where we're going to be talking about mind mapping with MindMeister and how that can help you if you are potentially about to start a new business or have already started a new business. So let's jump on in. I'm hoping you'll let me know if my sound is coming through okay. I'm guessing since nobody's complaining yet, that means it is coming through okay. So let's jump right into the content. What we're going to do for those of you who are perhaps new to mind mapping is we're going to use this mind map on the screen today as our presentation. And what I'm going to do is start up here, obviously with a welcome section, and then we're going to work clockwise around the mind map, moving right the way around until we reach, obviously, to conclusion. I'm going to turn off my camera in just a moment because it can be a bit distracting to have me on the side of your screen, but I just wanted you to see a real human being speaking to you and assure you also that this is a live broadcast. It's not pre-recorded, and of course that means anything could happen. I was supposed to be in a co-working office today, but that's unfortunately been closed due to COVID. So I'm at an Airbnb here in Huntington Beach, California, which obviously means the variables and unknowns could go up. So let's see how we get on. Hopefully we'll get through this without any problems. So first and foremost, let's jump into this welcome, and then I shall switch off the camera in just a second. So my name is Liam Hughes. I am the founder of Biggerplate.com. For those of you who'd like to, please feel free to reach out and connect with me on LinkedIn, where it was pointed out to me earlier this week that I've actually managed to secure quite a good sort of username there. So if you go in/Liam Hughes, you should be able to find me. But if it doesn't look like the face you're seeing on the screen, maybe just do a Liam Hughes Biggerplate and you should be able to find me on LinkedIn. So just a couple of abouts, just so you understand the context for our webinar today. So firstly, about Biggerplate.com, for those of you who don't know who we are. Biggerplate was founded in 2008. I'm going to use Biggerplate as a little bit of a case study today in sort of startup businesses, just to illustrate some of our ideas today. And our mission really is to help people go further with mind mapping, whether you're an absolute beginner who's never used mind mapping, or you're an advanced expert user. I see some of the names on the calls I know are very experienced users. Our goal is really, wherever you are in that spectrum, is to just kind of help you keep progressing and help you keep progressing in your career, your studies, or whatever it is you're doing, with support from mind mapping. What we're primarily known for at Biggerplate is our template library, but we also have a lot of courses, webinars, and other resources, all of which can help you just go further with mind mapping. Importantly, just so you understand this particular webinar, we are software neutral. So that means we don't make or sell software. We are a MindMeister partner and have been for many, many years. It's a great company. We're delighted to have MindMeister as a partner for many years, but we don't sell or make MindMeister. That's why it's useful for me to have someone like David on the call today as a backup. If you want to talk about subscriptions and pricing, that's not my territory, but I'm hopefully going to be able to direct you over to him. Importantly, an offer for you guys today on the call today. If you are new to Biggerplate and you want to upgrade to our pro membership, that's going to give you access to courses, webinars, and lots more. If you want to use the code Meister22, that's going to give you 50% off. The normal price is $29 a year, so that's going to knock 50% off that. And that code ends on 31st of January. So get it while you can, get it while it's hot. In terms of MindMeister, for those of you who may be not familiar with MindMeister, MindMeister is what you're going to see on the screen throughout this presentation. So I'm not going to dwell too much on it now. You're going to see the program in action, the software in action. Today, what I'm going to do is assume everybody on the line has zero knowledge of MindMeister. I know that's not going to be true. Some of you, I'm sure, are very experienced MindMeister users, but just so we can establish a base level, I'm going to assume everybody knows nothing. And therefore, I'm going to really try and focus on just the core features and functions of MindMeister that I believe are going to give you the most value and help you the most in what you're doing. Again, just be aware there is a good offer available if you wanted to subscribe to MindMeister's paid accounts, and you can use the code Biggerplate when you do that upgrade, and that's going to save you 10% on your MindMeister subscription. So some great offers to take advantage of if you are wanting to get into that world today. So what about this webinar today? Well, first and foremost, it's not exclusive to startups. We've badged it as MindMeister for startups, but I would almost prefer it to be called MindMeister for small businesses. I think startups is a very trendy term, but actually it doesn't describe most of the businesses that I encounter. Biggerplate's not really a startup anymore. We were started in 2008, so we're really now just a small business. I'm hoping lots of you on the line today are also small businesses. I think small businesses are the most interesting businesses. So I'm really hoping I can show you some things today that whether you're about to start a new business, you've maybe recently started a business, or you're actually quite a long way in the journey of running a business or being part of a small business, I'm hoping I can just show you how MindMeister can support multiple sort of areas in that today. The outcomes I'm hoping to give you today are some basic MindMeister knowledge and some ideas and templates to explore. I have a bit of a habit with this kind of topic of trying to do too much in too little time. I've got just under 60 minutes left, and I've probably tried to cram too much in. So what I'm going to do is dance through a number of different templates and examples without going into too much depth and detail, hopefully just giving you some ideas and some templates that you can go and explore in your own time using MindMeister to experiment. The structure I'm going to use today is really sort of thinking almost as if you've just had the idea for a new business. So what I'm going to talk about is really the thinking stage, maybe exploring that initial idea and how MindMeister can help you just kind of map out what in the early stages can be quite a fuzzy, unknown, unstructured set of ideas. And then you might move through into what might be considered a bit more of a planning stage. So you start to improve the focus. The idea takes shape a little bit more. And then you've got to try and sort of will that thing into reality. So turn that idea, that business concept you might have into reality. And then once the thing's up and running, you're maybe going to have this new challenge of trying to juggle 1,000 different things. Anybody who is involved in small businesses knows most people have to wear multiple hats. You have to cover lots of different roles, lots of different jobs. There is rarely one day that's like the previous one. So again, I think MindMeister is a great way to sort of help you manage that very mixed workload that can happen when you're a startup or a small business. So we're going to cover the think, the plan, and the manage stage, each in turn, using MindMeister to kind of explore each topic. So I'm just going to flick off this camera so we get my annoying face out of your way, and just do a quick check on Q&A. Okay, I can see a couple of questions in chat coming in, so I'm just going to probably leave those for the minute and loop back round. If you see the name David Muir answering questions in the chat, that is David from MindMeister, so please consider his answers to be decent, authoritative answers on any of your questions. I'll leave David to try and mop up some of the chat questions as we go, and then when I pause for Q&A, hopefully I'll be able to see the ones that we think are most useful for people. Okay, so first and foremost, let's just dive into this little topic of startups, just to give ourselves a little bit of context. So I'm down in Huntington Beach, California at the moment for a week, and then I head up to what might be considered sort of the home of startups, but really I consider it the home of startup sort of mythology, which is the Bay Area, San Francisco, and some of the myths that I think are deeply unhelpful, if not annoying, regarding startup businesses. So some mythologies that I have always found quite irritating. First, the visionary founder. I find this very annoying as a concept, the idea that a person or perhaps a couple of people kind of have this grand vision and then they set to work making that grand vision come to life. That's not really my experience either as a founder or in terms of the people I've met. Most people don't actually start with some grand vision. They start with just this small little idea that they start to explore and work with. They sort of bring it to life in stages. They don't start with this grand vision of this huge company necessarily. The second sort of mythology that I find kind of slightly frustrating is this quote that is attributed to Steve Jobs about every business needing to sort of make a dent in the universe. This phrase that you'll hear from slightly cheesy startup founders all over the place saying they're disrupting this and that and they're making dents in the universe. Again, I think that's just ego-driven nonsense. The universe doesn't care what you're doing. I'd be much more interested to talk to someone who's maybe going to create a little small business that's going to make a real difference in their local area. Not every new business or startup has to be a global game-changing disruptor. It can be a window cleaning business in a small town of 1,000 people that's going to do that thing better than anybody else is doing. So I think we've got to get away from this idea that every business has to start with the idea of being the next Google, the next Facebook, the next Uber. I just don't really think that's relevant for most people, and actually not necessarily that interesting. The third thing that I always found very frustrating when I was starting out was this whole concept of funding and investment. Not every business needs it. Not every business wants it. Biggerplate has never had any investment. It means we've moved a lot slower, perhaps, than if I'd taken somebody else's money and just burnt through it. But I think we've built something maybe that's a little bit more interesting, a little bit more personal. So again, I'd like to get away from this idea that every startup business has to go and immediately go looking for somebody else's money to fund it. I think there's a lot of ways, again, of starting small businesses that don't involve that. So when I'm talking about startups, I'm really not talking about these things. I'm talking about just creating small businesses, some of which may go on to become medium-sized or large businesses, but most of which are going to stay and be really successful in the small area that they want to be operating in. The reality for most startup businesses is a bit more, in my experience, like this. You've got an idea, something you think might be worth exploring, but the destination is unknown. You don't have that grand vision, this dent in the universe nonsense. More or less, it's kind of fumbling in the dark, trying to figure out what that idea means, what interests you about it, and what you might be able to do with it, if anything. So you've got an idea. We need to think and we need to work the idea. And you maybe think that idea could be useful for others, maybe valuable, maybe people will pay for it, or at very least it's interesting to you. It's an idea that you think might interest others, but you maybe don't know whether they will pay for it or not. Or maybe it just feels like something that is going to be meaningful to you. Now, if I look back at the Biggerplate journey when I started it, the one thing we didn't really figure out very early on was what might people pay for. We had, yes, we think this could be useful. Yes, we think it's interesting. And yes, we think it could be meaningful. But where we could see or struggle to see anything was how will people pay for it? What will people pay for? So, you don't necessarily have to have all these answers up front, but you've got to sort of work through them a little bit. And again, that reality that I alluded to earlier, once you do get something going, you're going to end up doing almost everything yourself, certainly in the early days, unless, of course, you take that investment money and throw money at other people. The majority of you on the call, I suggest, are probably the sort of startup and small business founders where you're going to end up covering a lot of ground yourself, juggling constantly between different projects, different priorities, different domains. You're going to be working with very limited resources, whether that's people, whether that's money, whether that's time. And as a result, you're quite likely to suffer from what I suffer from regularly, which is a slightly overloaded brain. And that could be because almost there are so many options in front of you, as well as so many challenges. One of the big challenges for me at Biggerplate is almost prioritizing all of the opportunities in front of us. That's almost harder in many ways than dealing with the challenges in front of you. So that's what I think are sort of the startup or small business realities. So where does mind mapping and MindMeister come into all this? Well, as I said earlier, I sort of want to go back as if you've just had a new business idea and talk through a little bit of a sort of a thinking process, then a planning process, and then maybe once you're up and running, a bit of a managing process and how MindMeister might fit in to each one of those three stages. So let's take a look, and I'm going to try my best to demonstrate live in real time just a couple of quick things. So this thinking stage, this is where, as I said earlier, the destination is not necessarily known. You've maybe got an idea, something you want to work on. So this is your early stage thinking where really you've got to kind of work the idea in order to sort of bring it to life. There's a book I'm reading right at the moment that was recommended to me only last week, but it's a really fascinating concept. And the book is called Make to Know. And the author's name I'm now blanking on, which I'll try and get into the notes after this session. But the idea of make to know is a lot of creative processes, artistic processes, business processes. They don't start with this crystal clear idea of what the end product is going to look like. They start with an initial bit of raw materials and they start to work with it. And as they work with it, it takes shape and the end vision becomes clearer in iterative stages. And that's really been my experience as a small business founder is I didn't really know what the end thing was going to look like until I was probably 2 or 3 or 4 years into it, actually. Now, you may not have that much time to run at things, but you've got to just kind of start by making the ideas a little bit more crystal. So exploring those ideas, the possibilities and the questions is something that many people will start by writing to-do lists or writing in notepads. I think using a mind map in MindMeister is a great way to explore those ideas and structure them and make them a little bit more coherent a little bit sooner. So what are the features in MindMeister that we're going to be using to do something like this? Well, really, it's the basic building blocks. So, for example, if you're using a PC like I am, using the insert or tab key is going to go outwards in your map, and using the enter or return key is going to go down. So using just those two keys, we can go out, or we can go down, we can go out, and we can go down. Now, it's worth saying, of course, we can also move branches just by holding down our mouse. You see with the blue line, MindMeister tells us where that topic is going to land, where it's going to sort of finish when I let go of the mouse. So really quickly in the software, we can build and we can move around information. The other thing that's worth mentioning in the new MindMeister, which is what you're looking at now, is you've also got this nice option, if you maybe don't use your keyboard as much as I do, to just use the plus symbols to go out. And again, that little plus symbol there to go down. So very easy in the software to build out your very basics of your tree structure, your mind map structure. So we're going to be using those kind of basic building functions. And then importantly with mind mapping software like MindMeister is actually the ability to make that information a little bit more interesting and to make it your own a little bit more. So we've got lots of options now in the software to format our information, so we can change the sort of the colors, the borders, the information, the color of the lines, whatever we really want to do. We've got a huge range of possibilities now within MindMeister to really kind of stylize that information to make it a little bit more personal and a little bit more interesting to ourselves. We've also got options of adding things like icons, little sort of, emojis into the information, whatever really sort of means something for us. So make it your own, make it your map of your ideas. So here's what we can do with the software, but what does that actually mean if you've got your new business idea? Well, let's go back to 2006 and my idea, which was based out of my university experience. I was a very poor quality student. I was not very engaged, struggling with my studies. And then I discovered mind mapping software. And this is when I was 21, I guess I would be. So I discovered mind mapping software and I thought, well, why hasn't anybody shown me this before? Why is this the first time I'm seeing mind mapping software? Why don't more students know about this and use this as a way of studying? And from there came the very sort of core idea of Biggerplate, which is a mind map library. So let's imagine back in 2006, I was slightly more coherent in how I approach this. What I might do is open up a new mind map, which really is about developing that idea. So if you've got a new idea that you think might be a business or that you want to turn into a business, a really simple way to start is maps that just are very simple templates. So I'm just going to open up a new mind map over here, which is a sort of a template that you'll see and heard of in many different ways, which is this sort of 5 W's and 1 H. So a who, what, when, where, why, and how process. Now, this isn't particularly business oriented, but it's a really useful way of kind of prompting some thinking. So if I went back to 2006 and I thought, well, what is the idea? So it's a mind map library. So what can people do there? So back then I thought, well, wouldn't it be cool if people could upload their mind maps and download mind maps? So if I was just back then, I would just be exploring each of these topics. Why is this useful? Well, I think for me, when I was a student, I found this kind of academic information is kind of boring, dull, not very dynamic. Whereas I thought we could maybe make mind maps that make the information more adaptable, more engaging, less text. So I just sort of would be building out these ideas around my initial thought of, and I might put in the central topic here, the mind map library that was to become Biggerplate. Now, obviously, what comes to your mind under each of these headings might be very different. So, for example, under the who, we might go in any one of the directions. We might say, who would use it? And who do I need help from, perhaps? So again, just very early stage thinking. Who would use it? Well, my idea back then was students, and I thought teachers. Neither really turned out to be true, but certainly back then my idea was that Teachers would upload academic information in mind map format. Students would download those mind maps and be able to edit and adapt and change and really make that information their own. But the point is, using just these 6 who, what, when, where, why, and how prompts can really get you off the blank page. And that blank page issue is kind of a real challenge, because you've maybe had this idea for a business knocking around your head for a little while, but don't quite know where to start. And this doesn't suddenly make the business come to life. But once you start to flesh out some of these questions and answers, you might just start to figure out what sort of needs to be worked on a little bit harder. So the questions of when and how and where. So, is this a global thing? Is this a local thing? What kind of questions might be prompted by these 6 simple headings to just develop that basic sort of fumbling around in the dark? Just try and put some meat on the bones of kind of what this idea is and where you might go with it. And I'm always saying to people that simple mind map templates can take you a very long way. The structure and the format of the mind map just encourages you to keep breaking things down, to keep building out your ideas and your concepts and your thinking. And then, as I said earlier, the ability to just sort of move things around the map and sort of just reorganize the information in ways so it can make the most sense to you, to make some of this stuff really stand out. And really sort of build out your picture, so that by the time you've kind of finished this mind map, all you've got is essentially your initial brainstorm around your idea for, in my case, a mind map library. But in the center of this could quite easily be, as I said earlier, sort of window cleaning in Huntington Beach. That could be the business that I think I want to start. So why might I be starting that business? Or why might people want to come to me instead of others? Who are my potential customers? Is it residential or is it local businesses? When might my services be most in demand versus not? So it doesn't really matter what the business idea is. Very simple mind maps can take you a really long way just by prompting your thinking. And then you've got the ability in the MindMeister maps, as I showed you, to really sort of format this mind map and sort of make it look the way you want, either using some of the preset themes that are really kind of vibrant and enjoyable now, and also doing some of those customized options like the lines, the filters, the colors rather, any of these kind of options. So let's jump back to our presentation mind map and just zoom out and see where we are at the moment. So one of the benefits of mind mapping software, as you can see, is the ability to be right in on the detail, but also just zoom out. And that's another real benefit. As you start to build out your ideas, you might find that you pursue a particular line of thinking into the real sort of detailed areas, but you're going to need to keep pulling yourself back up to this high level view to figure out where you are. And MindMeister is going to make it very easy, as you're hopefully seeing in this presentation, for us to zoom in, zoom out, get into the detail, or pull out for that big picture. So you've maybe spent some time building out a who, what, when, where, why, or some other kind of mind map. You don't have to follow that particular structure, but just an initial mind map, even if it's totally blank, that just says, what is my idea, and start to build out that thinking, can take you quite a long way. I'm just going to pause very briefly, have a quick look at the questions. I can see David is doing a sterling job of answering the questions. So if you're popping questions in the Q&A panel, David is able to answer them for you there. When I come to the end of the session, I might just pop around and see if there's any questions here that I might be able to share with other people as well. So thank you, David, for covering the Q&A. I can see a number of things in the chat. So again, as I mentioned at the beginning, if you pop your questions in the Q&A panel, it'll just make it a little bit easier for David and I to just manage questions. So one of the things I can see will be coming up a bit is about whether people will be able to get access to this mind map presentation and the recording afterwards. The answer is yes. The recording will be put up onto the Biggerplate YouTube channel, and the mind map will be made available, and you'll all receive the various links and things in an email from Zoom after the session. So you'll hopefully be able to get access to all of the resources you want to get your hands on. So we've done a bit of thinking. We've done some initial brainstorming really about our idea, and it might have been done by myself, or it might have been done with some of the people I want to get involved in the business perhaps. So then we've got to try and move into this planning stage. We've maybe got to start turning our idea into a little bit more reality. So this is where we need to start sort of improving our focus. We need to maybe start to pull together a little bit more depth, a little bit more detail. And we may be starting to shape sort of strategy, if I can use that a word, which is often misused, but really it's just about starting to think in terms of actually kind of long-term planning. What are we trying to do? And we might start to think about some of the practicals. We're going to start turning that idea into reality a little bit more and start to move a little bit from the thinking into the doing. So having done our who, what, when, where, why map, what we might start to do is new mind maps that are really going to pull together a bit more of that depth and detail. This is where some of the additional features of MindMeister are really going to start to come into their own. And this is where you can start to think of MindMeister as your sort of central control room for your ideas and your thinking. And rather than having lots of different things spread out over lots of different documents and lots of different programs, you can really use a MindMeister map as your sort of central sort of repository for your thinking, whether it's your initial who, what, when, where, why sort of map, or more developed formal maps like I'm about to show you. So a couple of features that I want to highlight to you here. The first is the notes feature, and a general principle in mind mapping is that we want to keep our mind map, what you're looking at, for example, here, you'll notice that every topic is really just one or two, or most of all, sort of 3 words at a time. So what we're trying to do in mind maps is generally just stick to kind of a couple of keywords at a time, rather than what we want to do is avoid long, big blocks of text and lots of information at once. Because the more of this you do, the harder it's going to become to actually sort of keep a view that's kind of succinct and easily summary. This immediately starts to become a bit overwhelming. So we want to try and stick to just a few keywords at in our mind map. But what we can do in MindMeister is use the notes feature to add depth and detail. So the notes feature can be found over here in the menu, and we can hit note. And when it pops open is a small sort of dialog box where we can add lots of extra info without creating clutter in the mind map. Now this document can go on and on and on and become a very, very long sort of box, but then we can just hide it. And you'll see here what we've got is this little visual sort of signpost from MindMeister to tell me that there's some extra detail just beneath the surface here. And this is where I will quite often copy chunks of text from documents or from emails or from websites or from articles, where I want to keep the kind of information readily available, but I don't want it getting in the way. So as you start to build out your plans for your business, this is a great way to pull in a lot of extra information without being overwhelmed by it. So just using notes throughout the mind map, you can attach notes to every single topic in the mind map if you want, is a great way of pulling together all that relevant information that you need. Another feature you're probably going to want to start leveraging quite soon in your MindMeister usage is the linking and attachments feature. So we can link or attach so lots of different things. So let's say, for example, we're doing a bit of maybe market research, for example. And I might go out and say, well, what I want to do for my mind mapping library idea is I want to go and look for, well, what are the software options out there? So I discover mindmeister.com, for example, as one of the software options that exists. And what I can do is just copy that website URL. And then in MindMeister, I can just come in here and I say add an attachment. But really all this is just a little hyperlink. So I say add that, and you'll see that little paperclip icon appears. And now what that will do is take me right where I want to go instantly. Now, if you imagine you're doing market research, or you're just trying to get your head around the area that you might operate in as a business, you can start to find lots of different resources all over the place that you want to keep track of. And one of the worst things you could do is just keep adding them to your browser bookmarks. That's going to get really out of hand very quickly. In the mind map, what you've got is a sort of a structure in which to drop these things. So you might have one branch of your mind map, which is about, for example, competitors. And you might have another which is about sort of associations perhaps in your market or something else. And then, you know, a link 1, link 2, link 3, etc. And likewise up here. Now, the key thing is those links are all in context. You understand where they come. They're not just a big list of bookmarks in your browser. Similarly, we can use the attachments function to attach files to any topic. So for example, perhaps we've got a little, maybe a little budget document that we're going to use for our business planning. What we can do is pop open that same option and say attachment. And then instead of using a website link, what I can actually do is upload a file. So I think we've got some things here I could use. Let's say, you know, conference. Here you go. So here's an Excel sheet. I can actually just upload that into the MindMeister map, and hey presto, it's there, it's ready for me, and I can download it from the map immediately. This is a great way, as I said earlier, to bring everything into one place so you don't get lost or lose time, waste time hunting around for resources, websites, or documents that are all over the place. They can be in lots of different locations, but the MindMeister map is going to help you to put your hands on the important information nice and fast. So I'm going to show you how we're going to use notes, links, and attachments in just a moment. And then the final feature I just want to highlight to you, because it may be that you start a business that will require you at some point to put together a written business plan. Now, again, I always used to get quite annoyed about this requirement, if you like, when I was starting out with Biggerplate, in that I didn't need a written business plan. I needed a plan, no doubt, but I didn't need a nice formal proposal. I wasn't trying to get any money from anybody. So it's possible that maybe you're going to the bank for a loan, or maybe to some early stage investors, or even just so you can feel you've formalized your thinking, that you might want to create a written document. Now, what I would really advise you to do is build out your thinking in a MindMeister map and then export that thinking into a Word document. And what you'll find is if you've done the thinking and the work in the MindMeister map, the Word document that comes out at the end of it will be much more coherent and well structured, because you've used a tool that's good for structure and thinking, and then you've sent it across into Microsoft Word for editing and printing. I'm going to show you how that's going to work in just a moment. So we've gone from our initial stage thinking of who and what and trying to explore idea to maybe starting to do things that are a little bit more businessy, a bit more formal, a bit more structured. So a couple of things we might do here. So as I said earlier, the business plan process can be a bit overwhelming. And if you start off trying to write a business plan by opening up a Microsoft Word document or equivalent, I think you're probably going to find it A, pretty boring, and B, pretty exhausting. It's not an easy way to understand the totality of the business you're trying to create. Now, if you look at a business plan template in MindMeister, and this map is available from biggerplate.com as well. If we open up, see here's just a link across to another mind map. And this is a business plan template, but in mind map format. So again, I would advise to sort of work clockwise around the mind map. And you'll see in some of these areas, you might not really have a need for some of this information. So for example, under operations, maybe you've got a topic in here that says facilities and equipment. Well, for example, with Biggerplate, we don't have any facilities or equipment. So actually, I don't really need this whole area unless I think perhaps IT infrastructure. Does that count? Offices. So we just start to build out whatever topics we want, or we can just delete things that we don't need. So what we do here in this business planning template is just build out the areas for our business idea that we think are most relevant. So for products and services, for example, if I was mapping out the Biggerplate world, we divide our products and services into these three categories. We have B2C, which is our pro memberships and our certification. We have B2B, which is sort of training and consulting that we provide for clients. And we have B2V, which is services we provide to software vendors and our partners. So under each of these kind of main headings, you'll see I'm just breaking down my business idea into these much more structured components. And this is where you start to build out and use some of that depth and detail that I showed you earlier, whether it's using notes to highlight some of the topics under your business and management. You might break down the history of the company so far. And you'll see we've used this notes feature. So perhaps it's 2022 and I've decided Biggerplate does need to go and get some investment. I'm going to pull together this business plan using this MindMeister document. I've got some notes here with a bit of the depth and the detail about the origins and the story, for example. And then I've got recent years information where we've started to flesh out our business model, etc. And we start to see how we've got all of these kind of topics broken down into their component parts. In here, under performance, I might start to do some of those attachments to things like the Excel spreadsheets that maybe give our financial performance over the last 1 year, 2 year, 3 year, whatever it might be. And I can pull all of this into the mind map structure and use MindMeister as my research and my writing area. So for example, if I come into the notes, and I decide to edit those, I could say Liam was a university student, not very focused, slow reader, about to fail exams. Now, this is the origin of Biggerplate, but I'm using it in my business plan to give a little bit of kind of context for what I wanted to build in. It's clearly a bit of old text left over from a previous session here. So we've got a lot of information in this notes feature. So we've used the notes, we've used the hyperlinks to pull together all of the different information we need. So as I mentioned earlier, under market analysis, we might start to look at market trends. We might start to look at what are we seeing in the mind mapping world? Well, for example, what I'm seeing are some trends towards the online tools. We're seeing increasing growth in our sort of Asian community. We've got in social economic terms, a sort of growing middle class. And you'll see here, I've got things saying C pest analysis. And that's another way that we can just use other maps to start to build out our kind of analysis, our market awareness, if you like, of what we see. So a SWOT analysis, which could be a component part, for example, of this business plan, or as I'll show you in a minute, could be a standalone mind map where we're just in our business plan building out a sense of our strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. So you'll see here we've got the notes feature again being used to actually do some of the writing. We believe we currently have a strong position, etc., etc., etc. So if you think about using the mind map to structure all of your ideas, pull together your research and do your writing, and remember, of course, as I said earlier, that we've got this real advantage in the mind mapping software of being able to zoom right in on the details of our year 10 performance, or just zoom out a little bit and understand where we are in this larger picture. Now, finally, what I wanted to show you was the exporting to Word. So let's say you've done all of your research and you've done a lot of your thinking and your structuring and you're working in this MindMeister map. What we can actually do is send the entire mind map using this export feature into a Microsoft Word document. Now, this might be putting a bit of strain on my Airbnb Wi-Fi, but let's give it a go here. So what we're going to do is ask MindMeister to push all of that information into a Word document. We've got options here to say what we will or won't include. So I'm going to say I don't want to include necessarily all these links and tasks, etc. What I really want is a written document. That's all I want. So let's get rid of some of this stuff as well. Let's say we want to show the notes. We're going to use plain text. And let's just give this a go. I haven't thought about too much what boxes I'm ticking or not there. So let's see what happens. And let's say we're going to download this Word output to my computer. And the reason we might want to do this is because your bank manager is probably not going to be able to understand the mind map. He's probably not going to accept the mind map as your kind of business plan. Or maybe you go to an investment company and that investor, maybe she's not going to want to see your business plan in the mind map. She's going to want that formal slide deck or that Word document. So that's what we've hopefully given ourselves here. So we've taken this mind map structure and we've just popped out here, and this has been created live and in real time, this Word document where it says contents and then nothing. But you'll see here what we've got is executive summary starts there. So let's just get rid of this. Zoom controls are in my way here. Hang on a second. Enable editing. Sure. Quite sure what that means. Here we go. Right. So we've got from the MindMeister map a really coherent document now with our structure, with a table of contents right at the beginning. And then we get down, we may or may not want all that table of contents. And you'll see here, we've got that executive summary information. We've got the origin, and here's those notes that I edited just now. I said Liam was a university student, not very focused, slow reader. And this is all the information that was in the notes on the topics. So the topics and that keyword focus means we can understand the structure of everything. And then we use the notes as a source of building out the text and the writing. And obviously this is a very sort of skeleton version here you're seeing in Word, but you see how the structure and the organization has come through so that things like our SWOT analysis has gone from the mind map view to now this very predictable, formal Word written document where really all we're doing here is the final editing and the printing. Now, I think this is a really powerful way of taking things from this mind map view that's really good for thinking and working on ideas and for researching, and then just putting it into a format that's more acceptable still to your investors or to banks or to partners. You might just want to have people get involved in the business. So I think to use the mind mapping software for your planning and then export it over to Word if you need to is very powerful. But even if you don't put it over into Microsoft Word, the mind maps are still hugely powerful for that thinking process and that planning process. So we talked earlier about SWOT analysis or pestle analysis, really simple ways to prompt your thinking, whether it's by yourself or with your co-founders or with your early stage management team, and just start to build out your thinking around the strengths of the company, the weaknesses, the opportunities, the threats, whatever. Now, you might really have no need to turn that into a Word document, but that planning stage that you're in now and starting to think about perhaps your operating environment using something like a pestle analysis. So if again I use my window cleaning company in Huntington Beach and I come into this map and I say, okay, well, what is the political influences in the Huntington Beach area if I wanted to start my window cleaning business? What are the economic conditions? Is Main Street vibrant, or are there lots of shops that are being shuttered? Am I going to have enough clients? What are the social dynamics in Huntington Beach that are going to help me to make my business or could influence my business? What legal structures or considerations should I have in trying to start my window cleaning business here in Huntington? What technology? Okay, maybe I start to think about, well, I probably need a website. Maybe I need sort of a mobile booking system or something might be. So it really doesn't kind of matter what, but the prompts in the mind map are going to help you to just explore and build out your ideas. And then you can start to use those notes, those hyperlinks, those attachments, and even that export to Word to turn your thinking, which you do all in the MindMeister maps, into a more kind of coherent output for other people if needed. So we've hopefully moved in a very quick little tour through thinking about our initial idea of who, what, when, and why, to then moving into a bit more of a formal sort of business planning process. And hopefully after all that effort, you get your new business up and running, and then you're into the really hard part, which is actually surviving and managing that business. And this is really where obviously a lot of businesses struggle and sadly fail. And having been running Biggerplate now for close to 15 years, I can tell you we've had lots of those moments of coming very close to that edge. And really, it's just about adapting. That's what I just think over and over again enables you to survive, is adapting to the changing situation. No business, whether it's window cleaning in Huntington Beach or a mind map library online or any other kind of business, is immune to the changes going on around us, which seem to be accelerating constantly. So what we need are good tools and techniques for managing that complexity. So we need something to help us manage the day-to-day. And most of you, as I say, running small businesses, you're going to be trying to cover multiple domains. So for example, you might find that you have no experience in sales, but you're now salesperson number one. You might have no experience in marketing, but now you are the marketing team. Maybe your experience was in finance. Maybe you were an accountant, but now you're also in charge of operations. So you've got multiple domains to now try and manage. And under each of those domains, you've probably got multiple projects, multiple things in motion at any given time. Now, again, I'm heavily biased, but I think mind mapping software is the best way to manage this sort of situation. We've got lots of features in the software, and not even listed here. I've got priority icons, progress icons, that linking function, again, very, very useful. But one of the things that I haven't actually even mentioned here as a feature is sort of adaptability. I could spell a bit dangerous. There we go. So the adaptability to take in new information, add it to the mind map, see where it fits, and know what to do. So what we need in our kind of small business or our startup world is we need for our systems to not be totally ruined by an unknown coming into the field. What we need is when something new comes into us, we want to be able to hold it up against our plans, our intentions, and figure out where that fits and what we want to therefore do with it. And the mind mapping software and using MindMeister is going to give you such an adaptability to take new information in, move it into the relevant place, reorder things and sort things, reprioritize as we need to. And I think that's probably the most powerful feature in MindMeister, is simply that ability to maneuver information around the page. But other features we've got, we can start to use some of the sort of icon features in MindMeister to, for example, maybe we want to mark things as perhaps priority 1 or priority 2, or we might want to mark things as particularly kind of time sensitive. We might want to use things like completion markers, progress icons, as it says down here, to illustrate something as a quarter done, half complete, 3/4 complete, or complete in its entirety. And as I highlighted earlier, we might want to link to other things, other mind maps, other documents. So how might that then translate into sort of working mind maps for you as the business owner or the founder? Well, I would advocate trying to sort of create what I can call a sort of a manager dashboard, but it could quite easily be the sort of the owner dashboard. And this is really a mind map that sort of summarizes all of the key areas of your business and make sure you can kind of put your hand and your brain on the important information when you need to. So let's just zoom this map out a little bit here. Let's just say, I'm having a bit of a moment here. It's not what I thought that would be. Okay, so let's just close down some of these branches and come at this step by step. So as I said earlier, as the founder or the founding team in the business, you're going to be covering a lot of different areas. So what we might want to do is just create a sort of a central control room for all of your thinking, all of the things going on in your business. So in my new business, for example, I've got customers branch where I've got a sort of breakdown of my top 3 customers and then my other customers. I've got a sales branch here where I'm sort of managing leads, or if you like, prospects up through a cold, warm and hot sort of cycle, so that hopefully Gamma, who's at the top of the hot sales pipeline, hopefully then moves through up into customers where I can then start to build out, okay, what projects are we working on with them? Project X, maybe what admin associated with them. Maybe we've got to send invoice. So here's where I might, under Gamma Co, I've got my send invoice task. So I might start to use some of that task sort of functionality or task icons and say, right, we've got an invoice to send. And then I might use some of that attachments feature. I might say, let's attach the invoice here. So I haven't got an invoice to hand, but let's just use this PDF here. Maybe there's our invoice that we want to send to Gamma Co. And again, I could then just be using the completion icons to say, I've ticked that off. So what we've got here in the mind map is our sort of headlines and control centers. But as I said earlier, not everything is in the mind map. Sometimes you might just be linking away to other documents. So for example, we've got a customer up here, Bravo Co. We've got a training project. We've got the planning phase. I'm halfway through my workshop planning, as I can see from this icon here. And I've got this little attachment, and this is going to take me off to another type of document. It could be a Word document. It could be another mind map. It could be an Excel sheet. It could be whatever I'm using to do my workshop planning. So importantly, the planning for the workshop is not happening in this mind map, but this mind map is going to help me put my hands on that document really nice and quickly instead of losing time hunting around in files and folders. Importantly, as the business owner or the founding team, because I'm juggling between all of these different areas, if I'm working perhaps over here in the social media marketing, maybe I'm doing the Twitter scheduling because I'm also the marketing team, remember. If somebody calls me up and says, I'd like to talk to you about the Bravo Co training project, I can just pause here, hide this information. I know that Bravo Co is a customer, so I'm going to come up here. I know that they're a top 3, so I'm coming up into Bravo Co, come into training, and I'm ready to speak about whatever it is. And I can put my hands on all of the important information, whether it's information about site access. I'm using the notes feature to keep me some of that information nice and handy. I've got a little task here that says get the PO number. I've got some send invoice information. So perhaps somebody's called me up and said, where is the invoice? Or can we pay this invoice? All these kind of things are connected up. Now I can put my hands on all the essential information from this single mind map dashboard. And that's why I'd really advocate for founders and founding teams to sort of try and create their kind of management overview of the business system. And remembering that not everything is in this mind map, but this mind map should be able to point you to where you need to go to get what you need to get. We've also got areas over here for strategy where we might start to break down our objectives, key results, anything like this. So it doesn't really matter. It's your business, your dashboard, but I would really advocate trying to create this kind of control center for your business as soon as you can using MindMeister. So you've moved through from thinking over here, a very basic, what's my idea? You did some planning, and now you're actually in the managing phase. And again, you could use MindMeister for any number of different applications within the business, from marketing plans to sales plans. For example, here's a project planning mind map. Again, just using all of that same feature set in MindMeister to plan out a project. This is a project, for example, to run a conference event. So we've got our objectives up here. We've got our kind of goals that we're aiming for. We've got an overview of the project. We've got the constraints of the project here, the budgets, etc., etc. And then we start to build out the scope of the project, what's included, what's excluded, the schedule of the project. Now you see you're putting together a huge amount of information in this mind map, but I'm hoping, even though I'm going through it quite quickly, you don't feel overwhelmed by what's in front of you at any stage. And remember, you've got this great ability to just sort of be zoomed out enough to see what you need to see, and then dive into the detail when you need to. The MindMeister map is going to make it really easy to achieve that kind of micro and macro balance. So that's a very quick whip through, and the sort of time flies by for me. But the key thing is we go think, plan, and manage, but then we've got to just keep repeating that cycle. This is what I've been doing for 15 years at Biggerplate, really, is I kind of keep thinking constantly as if it's a new business. Well, what would I do next? Stay creative. You can use mind maps to prompt really quite creative thinking about your business. So for example, Scamper is a pretty well-established framework for creative thinking where you start to brainstorm around, well, if we were, for example, going to try and improve Biggerplate Pro, what might we substitute? What might we combine? What might we adapt? What might we modify? What could we put to other use? What could we eliminate? What could we reverse? And if you actually take the time to really push yourself or your team to think about this, how might that work? Well, at the moment, people pay to become Biggerplate members. Well, what if you reverse that? Well, we pay people to become Pro. I don't know how that works, but potentially it could. Maybe that hints at perhaps maybe affiliate schemes or referral bonuses or something like that. So you can use little prompts like this to kind of prompt your thinking, even when the business has been established a long time, like mine has. Other things you could do is use really kind of out there creative prompts to really think differently and unusually about things. So instead of using a more formal set of prompts, you could use some quite bizarre prompts. So we've got a set of mind maps called creative prompts, and we use these with clients to just prompt really different thinking. So if our challenge again was to improve Biggerplate Pro, we would say, how would you make it more bicycle, newspaper, farmer, Italy, banana, elephant? So a really random set, totally random set of words that just prompts you to think, well, what are characteristics of elephants? Perhaps they're sturdy, they're old. Where do you find them? You find them in Asia, in Africa. So I just kind of build out the characteristics of elephant, and I maybe think about, well, how do we improve? How do we make Biggerplate more elephant? Well, elephants are in Asia. Maybe we need to translate the website into Chinese, or maybe we actually just need to translate into multiple. So Chinese, Korean, etc., etc. So you can use mind maps to prompt in very unusual ways. And the great thing with this software is it's a great way to support that creative thinking without getting in the way of it. You can really allow the mind map to just capture and help you categorize and structure your ideas and your thinking along the way, which is a great way to sort of re-energize your thinking around your business, perhaps when you've been doing it for a little while, or maybe if you're feeling a bit stuck, what you thought was going to be the way forward didn't turn out so well. We've had lots of those false starts at Biggerplate, and the key is to just keep adapting, be creative in how you think about those problems. Then you've got the ability to turn those into plans. So those kind of radar views, that SWOT analysis and pestle type analysis, to kind of always make sure you're aware of your operating environment, nicely connected up in the mind maps. And as I said, the management of things, so that mind maps to help you stay in control of your teams, your projects, and yourself. Another really, really great use for MindMeister. So that's a very quick whip through, hopefully not too quick. Just in conclusion, some related resources. We've got a MindMeister course on strategic planning with MindMeister. That's included with Pro membership. That's going to be live online on biggerplate.com by the end of January. So if you come into the courses area, Biggerplate, you'll see we've got some MindMeister courses. And by the end of January, there's going to be a new one in here with the more modern MindMeister branding. That's going to be MindMeister for strategic planning. So hopefully that'll be useful for anybody who's in that field. May also be worth having a look at this video on YouTube. This is a webinar we did last week about personal productivity with mind mapping with MindMeister, and again, particularly helpful for individuals trying to manage a lot of different things. Finally, don't forget those 2 discounts and deals that I highlighted at the beginning of the session. You can save on both Biggerplate Pro and on MindMeister. So those are the codes there on the screen for you. Don't forget the Biggerplate code ends on the 31st of January, so don't take too long if you want to take advantage of our Pro membership. And I'm going to now just pause and take a look at any questions that have come in that have not yet been answered by David, who I know has been doing a sterling job attending all of the ideas. So Monica has a nice question there. That's a nice easy one. Is there a way to put initials on a section to note who is assigned to do what? So Monica, great question. Let's just go to over here, for example, or maybe let's use this one. So maybe under our customers section, we might say that Bravo Co. For example, we might just use, we use this in our business a lot. We'll just use a brackets and initials here to just say, for example, Bravo Co. is a Liam customer, GH, that's Graham, is Tango, maybe again, Tango might be a GH customer, that kind of thing. Somebody there says about attending the basic version. I think David's going to pick that one up. There's a couple of questions in here around different accounts in MindMeister. I'm going to let David try to answer those, although I think he's under pressure to try and cover them all. There's anything about sort of what type of subscription you need at MindMeister, I'm going to let David pick those up. Or if you don't get an answer from David live in this session, I'd suggest you just pop a question over to the MindMeister team to just kind of get clarity on that. Creating multiple maps, I think that's hopefully been shown, but if we wanted to just create new mind maps, for example, we come out into MindMeister, the sort of the dashboard view, if you like, of MindMeister, or your account view, just say new mind map, and it's going to create that mind map from scratch. And there we go. So my new mind map, and here's my, for example, my business idea. Keyboard is frozen. is idea. And that's where I might do my who, what, when, where, why, and how options to just start building out my ideas, as I said at the beginning. So creating new maps and multiple maps, very, very easy in MindMeister. So yep, definitely an easy one to crack onto there. Just looking for any other questions. I can see David has answered 21 of your questions. So that's pretty impressive work, David. Pour yourself a beer at the end of today. I can't see any other questions in the Q&A that David hasn't answered yet. So I'm just going to have a quick look also at the chat. Anil, great question. Where do you find the colorful icons? Yeah, so in terms of icons, the new MindMeister that we're looking at on the screen now, it's new, sort of about 3 months old, really, really nice. So to add icons, what we can do is pop open this little sort of emoji symbol here. And so let's say we add an icon, let's add this little rocket ship. So what MindMeister does as a default is it sort of matches the color of the icon to the color of the topic, if you like. So there's green color. But actually, if I come off the topic, reselect the topic, and then click the icon itself, you see, or the image rather, it pops open this, and you see this little green circle here. That's where I can then play around with the color of that icon, that image, to whatever it is I want, right the way down to going the whole way through the spectrum. So for example, if like Biggerplate, you've got a color palette that you, color codes that you know and use. So 007 EA7 is Biggerplate blue. I can change the color of the icons to match the topic there. So yeah, very, very simple to kind of now really customize those images color-wise to your brand. Kershid, I can see a question there about folder structure for mind maps. I'm going to try and just cover that really quickly because I think that's a great question. So let's have a look in my account here. I'm in the Liam Biggerplate sort of MindMeister account, if you like. And you'll see here I've got a whole set of folders, and I could say create a new folder just from here. So the folder structure in MindMeister is going to happen sort of in your account area. And then obviously you, for example, click into the MindMeister for Startups. And here we are with our presentation mind map, and that's going to pop open. So yeah, folder structure in MindMeister, very, very straightforward and easy to use. And then other questions I can see here. Thank you very much for the kind feedback. I hope it hasn't been going too quickly for you. Rodrigo says he's impressed quite a few colleagues, sending them a Word version of a brainstorming session. Yeah, absolutely right, Rodrigo. So this is this thing we've got to be very clear around. You might be very enthusiastic about MindMeister and mind mapping, but not everybody's ready to receive information in MindMeister format or mind map format. So we've got to be willing to just adapt that information, push it into a Word document. The key thing that your chat point makes is if you've done your brainstorming and organizing of your ideas and your information in the mind map, it's going to make for a more coherent Word document. And that's the thing I talk about all the time with mind mapping is it doesn't matter whether the output you need is PowerPoint slides, Word documents, Gantt charts, whatever it might be. If you've done the thinking and the organizing of the ideas and the information in a mind map, it's going to create a better output because you will have had to structure and organize that information much more coherently in a mind map. If you think about a Word document or PowerPoint slides, they don't really force much structure to your thinking. They allow you to ramble. They allow you to add more slides and to write infinitely. But actually the mind map structure, this tree structure, means you have to find a place and you have to figure out how things fit together. And that means the output that follows is almost always more coherent and better structured. So absolutely, I'm not surprised you've impressed people with a Word document that actually was secretly a mind map originally. David, I think David has answered Joseph's question in the chat. Use themes. So the question here about themes, I really love the new themes in MindMeister. So let's take our project plan map here and let's just show you how themes work. You see this little kind of colorful symbol down here. You've got loads of different themes in here to just get you started. And I can just click that and it's going to apply a theme to the entire mind map. And you see I can scroll down and got all sorts of different styles, including one called Nostalgia, which takes you back to the previous style of MindMeister. So lots of different theme options there to kind of very quickly stylize your maps. Or as I think David was answering in the question, you can use the control key on your map to select multiple topics and apply a change to all of them. Perhaps you want a sort of coherence. So that's just using the control key on my keyboard and clicking multiple topics, then popping open that formatting. And you see I can change sort of several at once if I want to, that kind of thing. So hopefully, I think Joseph, David had answered your question already, but hopefully I've just been able to sort of illustrate the answer there. I think I've seen most of the questions come in. Angela said, can you upload your own images? That's a great question, Angela. Yes. So let's take a quick look at an example of that. So let's just say for this project plan, what we want to do is put maybe an image in the middle. Maybe it's a graph or a graphic. What we can do is use this option here and say add media. Now media covers all sorts of different things that we can do with MindMeister, but let's just use, for example, a picture. There you go, there's my dog. Let's add the dog into the mind map. So not a particularly project plan image, but you might have a section of your mind map in your business plan. Perhaps it's about a little graphic or a chart. So we can not only can we add the image, but we can also resize that image. We can make it bigger. We can make it smaller. We can also experiment with the position of the image in relation to the text, so above or below or wherever we need to. So hopefully that answers your question very quickly there, Angela, about uploading JPEGs, images, screenshots, any sort of media. And as you might have noticed in my presentation mind map, what we've also able to do in MindMeister is even add and embed videos in the mind map. So I just wanted to flag this related resource, but this video here in the mind map is actually playable within the mind map. Now I think that's extremely powerful, very powerful, very useful feature to just pull together related resources as you need to. I can see that my time is up and has flown by very quickly. As always, I've tried to put in too much and gone probably too quickly, but I'm hoping what I've just been able to give you a sense today is the various ways that MindMeister can support the very early stage fuzzy thinking era of your startup business. It can also support the more structured formal planning for your business if you need to do a business plan, or even if you're an established business and you need to do your strategic planning for the next year, the next quarter. And as I hopefully highlighted in this kind of orange section, once you're up and running, it can also really help as your sort of operational control center for your business as well. So as I said at the beginning, if there's any questions, any follow-up, please don't be afraid to reach out to me at my LinkedIn address or via email. My email is there on the screen. Ooh, just popped open Outlook, which is interesting. Liam@biggerplate.com. But in the interest of time, I'm going to wrap up very quickly. I'm going to say a huge thank you to David, who's made my life a lot easier by answering a lot of your questions in the Q&A. So thank you, David, from MindMeister. If you have any questions about the subscriptions, the pricing, the different options at MindMeister, then do reach out to the MindMeister team specifically on those. But anything around mind mapping or Biggerplate, feel free to get in touch. So it just remains for me to say thank you very much for taking the time out of your day to join me today. The recording and the materials for this session will be available to you shortly, hopefully within the next 24 hours or so. And David has just put in the chat there any questions for MindMeister. The best email address to reach is support@mindmeister.com. So with that, I wish you all a very pleasant remainder of your day. Best of luck with your startups, your small businesses, or your work in general. And please don't hesitate to join us again very soon. Thanks for joining.